Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
Welcome one and all to the Defiant Takes Football Show. I'm Max Dean. You can find me on Twitter at @TheMaxDean, and I am here with Shane Carter at Shane Carter.
Turn the music back on.
Yeah, man. I mean, I need something to vibe to tonight because it's been a long day for many reasons. We'll get to all of them. So first and foremost, thanks for joining me on this late night post draft live stream, Shane. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good, actually. There's a lot of surprises that came in that draft. I'm happy with the team that with the pick that my team made. I think there was some players who I wouldn't call them reaches. I'm just surprised where they went, and some players I'm surprised that fell. But we'll get into that here in a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you can only be so critical, right? Because sometimes it's easy to fall into the tendency to say there's these massive gaps between the quality of player, right? Or the what the grade is. When we put a number on it, it makes it easy to seem like there's this really big discrepancy. But the reality is that these guys are all high-level college players, and our opinions can be slightly different than others. That being said, there were some surprises for sure. The Jets definitely being one of them, no doubt about that. But so today was a good day, right? Got up early, did some final player reviews. We're able to get them all published. Published the very last one, the 44th one of the cycle, Mazi Smith, minutes after the draft started, right? So it was right up against
destiny.
And then watching the draft, trying to keep up with everything on socials and whatnot, and then taking care of my kids, making them food, feeding them, making sure they don't drown themselves in the pool, everything, And then pick 15 comes. It's a questionable pick, and now we're here, and that's my night. How did your night go, man? I think you had a little more fun than I did.
I have fun every draft. The stress of it comes from when your team is up and you hope they pick a good player. You don't always know if they pick the player you want, but you just hope they pick a good player. And I was surprised they went Mazi Smith just for the Cowboys' perspective, just because they traditionally don't go interior defensive line in the first round. The first round, they love going cornerback, edge rusher, wide receiver, offensive line. That's kind of their go-to positions. And what's great about the Mazi Smith pick is that, one, he was my second-ranked defensive tackle, and if it weren't for Jalen Carter, he'd be the best one. And they have defensive tackles who can stuff the run but not pressure the quarterback, and they have defensive tackles who can pressure the quarterback but not stuff the run. Mazi Smith now has the ability to do both of those and becomes the one guy on the interior of that defensive line who can do both of those things, and they've needed that for so long.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny that the two picks that our teams made were both reviews that we both recorded and released today, so they're very fresh in our minds for sure. But let's circle back to the very beginning of the draft, right? We start off chalky. Bryce Young goes to the Carolina Panthers. That surprised approximately nobody. I had been saying all along he was the best quarterback in the class and should absolutely go number one. I also was of the opinion that CJ Stroud was clearly the second best quarterback and should 100% go number two. So the fact that the Texans took him there, I mean, aside from the numerous criticisms from everybody else, in mainstream media, I would have been very critical as well. How did you feel about that selection, and would you have gone in hard on them if they did pass up on a quarterback?
I wouldn't have gone hard on them, only just because that would tell me that they don't like any other quarterback in this class, and they would rather go with the guys they got and set themselves up for next year. But it didn't matter. They got the quarterback they wanted, or at least the quarterback they're happy with, and they got arguably the best overall player in Will Anderson, and made a ballsy move to go from 12 to 3 to pick back-to-back. That was a fun way to start the draft.
For sure. So all of the gamesmanship about them not taking quarterback and then taking one, that made the start of the draft kind of fun after a chalky pick. But then they make it even more fun, and they go up to number 3 and take probably my number 3 graded player overall if I did a numerical grading system. And so big time player, great character guy, great way to start off your locker room. Because, for the Texans, it feels like they have essentially been in let's just wait mode for the first 2 entire years of this regime, right? They didn't have a first round pick in 2021. They didn't really do much in free agency. They were kind of getting out of some cap situations. Then they trade Deshaun Watson and they draft a guard and a corner, but they don't really do anything in any skill positions. And they're just not doing anything. This is the first real series of moves where they are putting a stamp on the roster and saying, this is the identity of who we are. Right. And not to take away anything from a guard, but, I don't think that player was going to change the trajectory of their franchise, right? So that was a great way to start the day off. Going up through the rest of the first top 10 picks, let's call it, we had Richardson going to the Colts, Witherspoon going to the Seahawks, Paris Johnson Jr. going to the Cardinals, Raiders pick Tyree Wilson, Bijan Robinson goes to the Falcons.
Yes.
At 8. And
I've been calling for that for weeks. I manifested that. Everyone was saying Eagles at 10 or Cowboys 26. He's going to the Falcons at 8.
That's so crazy to me. He's a great player, right? Like we talked about it. We broke him down. That is not the issue here. It's just when you got these other guys available, like I understand that maybe there were some red flags about Jalen Carter. How do you not take Jalen Carter if you're the Atlanta Falcons, right? Like, how do you not take? I don't know.
They've gone splashed 3 years in a row now with Kyle Pitts, Drake London, and then Bijan Robinson. And so whoever the quarterback is this year and next year, they're going to have plenty of weapons.
That they are, and they have a really good run game. And Bijan is going to make that much harder. I from a fit perspective, it's awesome. From a value perspective, it's really hard for me to get behind. It's very hard for me to get behind that. Let
me ask you this: Do you dislike Bijan at 8 more than you dislike Gibbs at 12? In terms of value of the player, which just because I'm just curious.
I would say for me, I have more of an issue with Bijan at 8 because at least when you pick Gibbs, some of the other really good players are off the board already. You got Wright off the board, you got Skoronski off the board, you got Jalen Carter off the board. I mean, not that I'm justifying it, but those are some of the key players that make it hard, really, really hard for me to get behind a Bijan Robinson pick. Because, I mean, those are all franchise players at really important positions. And I know that their offensive line's been, okay, and they just re-signed Gary, and they just re-signed their guard as well. So they don't necessarily need offensive line, but definitely Jalen Carter. That's tough.
Defense would have been the right play. It's just hard to pass up Bijan, especially if he's your number one player. It's usually better to go with your number one player and not look back. But in the first round, it's a little more nuanced than taking your best player overall.
I get that. But, also Christian Gonzalez, too, for me. I know he went later, but personally, I love him. I thought he's awesome. Yeah. Right. So, for me, that would be hard. And not that he landed
a great spot.
He did. Well, so we'll get there. So, look, obviously, Bijan Robinson was one of the surprises of the night. In it's not a surprise in that, even Trayshawn is this is going to happen. But it's more like you take a tight end, you take a big body wide receiver when you don't need one, and then you have Tyler Algier. Do you really need a running back? No, that's going to happen. So it's it was kind of like a psychological thing more than an actual realistic expectation thing. So I think that it's a surprise. But, I mean, as we round out the top 10, we got Jalen Carter to the Eagles and Darnell Wright to the Bears. So
love that pick.
So good. That's a great pick.
It really is because they fixed their offensive line by signing Nate Gary, who's going to play. I think he's going to play left guard. They keep Tevin Jenkins at right guard, who finally has a spot after years of not knowing where he's going to play. Cody Whitehair's moving back to center. Braxton Jones, the 7th round revelation. And now they have Darnell Wright, who can stay at his natural position at right tackle. They traded for DJ Moore. They have their 3 receivers. They have their backfield. They have their quarterback. The Bears, in an otherwise kind of empty NFC, could make a playoff push.
Yeah, it's really going to depend on the development of Justin Fields, and I think
Mhm.
that's why this is such an important pick. Where you trade out of 9 and you move back a spot. As much as I love Jalen Carter, and I think he's a truly incredible defensive tackle,
Mhm.
when you combine the character concerns, however small they might be, and the need that you have to make sure that your franchise quarterback is protected by high quality offensive linemen, it makes all the sense in the world. And then I love the pick as well, right? They
I
could
do
have
too.
taken pretty much anybody, and I thought that was a great pick.
You could argue that the Bears actually won the first round just because they went from the first to the 10th pick after gaining multiple picks along the way, securing their biggest hole, in my opinion, in the offense is at right tackle. They have picks for this year and next year secured. Their quarterback's on the rookie contract. They have their 3 receivers set, and even though obviously the Texans made the big splash plays, I think other teams did well too. You can make the argument that the Bears maybe won just on how little they had to do to get what they wanted.
Yeah, I think you could definitely call them one of the winners of the night for sure. There's some other teams that did exceptionally well, and I think the Eagles are one of them. I mean, come on, NFL, what are we doing? Giving Nolan
Let it pick
Smith?
Georgia players.
Oh my God. So I mean, look, forget about Jordan Davis last year. Just coming out of today with Nolan Smith and Jalen Carter,
Mm-hmm.
that's tough, man. That's tough.
I'm a Cowboys fan, but I respect the hell out of Howie Roseman. That man knows how to draft. He doesn't reach. He just waits. He waits for what he needs to wait for. He gets what he needs to get. He trades up when he wants to trade up. He ain't afraid to make these moves, and he is really, really good at evaluating. I'll give him a lot of credit for that. I think some of the free agency stuff they do is kind of iffy just because some of the guys they sign don't always pan out. Some of the guys that they let go usually play well once they leave. That's totally subjective based on how you want to handle your cap situation. But the Eagles are actually have become, after a while, not really being a really good draft and evaluate team.
They are, and I think they're very aggressive in everything they do without being reckless. I think they might get themselves into a couple of bad contract situations, but they leave themselves a lot of outs. And how proactive they are in their contract negotiations. I mean, guess who was the first quarterback of the cycle to get a contract this year? Of course, it's Jalen Hurts, and of course, every other quarterback's going to get more. Lamar Jackson just got more.
Love it.
Justin Herbert is probably going to get more.
Yep.
Joe Burrow is definitely going to get more.
Joe Burrow might ask for 60 because if Jalen Hurts got 51, Lamar Jackson got 52, and let's just say Justin Herbert asked for 54, 55 a year, Joe Burrow, in my opinion, is better than all those guys. He's done more and he's like on the cusp of a Super Bowl type of quarterback. He might ask for 60. And if you're the Bengals, you're going to say no.
He's the best of the bunch, no doubt. And I don't know.
The only quarterback I would take above Joe Burrow in this league is Patrick Mahomes.
Right now, yeah.
And right now, Pat Mahomes, the best quarterback in the game, is underpaid.
That was one of the best all-time contracts in my NFL experience.
Yes,
that was killer. We'll talk about that another time. But essentially, yes, the Eagles are crushing it on multiple fronts. They got 2 more defensive linemen. They will be able to add to their offensive line if necessary. Later in the draft, they've got plenty of picks to do so. So really nice job there. I think, there's nothing else really here that's like really stands out to me.
The teams were full of guys who went to teams that had a need, but really is more like a depth need rather than like a starter. Like you see something like Lucas Van Ness going to the Packers. They have guys on the defensive line, but they really wanted some improved depth plays and also a takeover when the guys eventually get traded or their contract expire. Your team, the Jets. You want to talk about them? I'm sure you got something to say.
All right, so let's run through the first pick. I'm just going to read them all. List them off real quick. So we've got Skoronski going to the Titans at 11.
Yep.
We got Jahmyr Gibbs going to the Lions at 12. We've got Lucas Van Ness going to the Packers at 13, which I thought is a great pick for them. We have the Steelers taking Broderick Jones. They traded up for him.
Love it.
That made all the sense. They needed a tackle, went up and got their guy. That makes a lot of sense.
They're going to go from having one of the worst offensive lines to one of the better ones in an offseason.
Well, they're certainly going to be largely improved. I mean, we'll see how some of these guys are,
Yeah.
and especially like a Jones year one. We'll see, but it's going to be a lot better and is absolutely necessary. They really needed this. I think for them to have come out with a corner instead of a tackle would have addressed a need, not the biggest need though. Will McDonald goes to the Jets at 15. Commanders take Emmanuel Forbes at 16. The Patriots get Christian Gonzalez a pick later at 17.
Your guy.
The Lions take Jack Campbell at 18. The Bucks get Kalijah Kancey at 19.
Love it.
The Seahawks get Jackson Smith-Njigba at 20.
That surprised me.
It surprised me a little, but at 20, I'm like, hell yeah, because I love Jackson Smith-Njigba.
Well,
like for me,
value-wise, yeah.
So when we look at this, there are a lot of guys who I really like in this bunch, right? Like, I wouldn't go 18 for Jack Campbell, but he's definitely one of my guys. I think the dude's a beast. I love Kalijah Kancey. He was my defensive tackle too. And so at 19, that's perfect for me. I don't know if it necessarily like is their biggest need, but he's a good player. Jackson Smith-Njigba at 20, I think is a steal. Gonzalez at 17, I think is a steal.
Yeah,
and we already kind of mentioned some of the other ones. So what stands out to you here? We'll get to the Jets in a minute. Because I'm gonna.
Okay. So Jackson Smith-Njigba to me, like the value wise, is actually very good value. He's my second rated receiver in this draft, and no receiver was taken until him at 20. I thought Seattle was going to double down on defense in the first round, just because that's what their biggest need was. They had receivers, but I guess with Njigba, you pair him up with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, and you really are putting all your trust in Geno Smith. And they even told him, it was all across the broadcast, that the possibility of them drafting a quarterback might happen. It might still happen tomorrow with Will Levis and Hendon Hooker both still on the board. The Gibbs pick at 12 was the first time I went, what? Like where'd that come from kind of pick? Just because I thought Gibbs, if he was going to go in the first round, would be like an end of the first round kind of player. Just because we have gone this way of running backs not having the same kind of value they once have. I like the fit of Campbell in the Lions defense. And just because he has that, he's very much the old school type of linebacker. He's my third rated linebacker though in this linebacker class, but he's very much like what you want out of a linebacker in Dan Campbell's system. He's gonna read the defense. He's gonna call the plays. He's gonna call alignments. He's going to set up the run. He's gonna follow the quarterback. He ain't gonna be a spectacular coverage guy. He ain't gonna be like a guy that you ask to go on a whole lot of blitzes. Like every now and then he will, but he's gonna be a traditional stopgap, a good tackling inside linebacker, and that's fine. He might be the one player in the first round I would say I could guarantee won't bust. There are guys just because he might be the safest pick, if that makes sense. He's a very safe pick type of linebacker. I love the Kalijah Kancey pick to Tampa, by the way. Pairing him up with Vita Vea is nasty because Vita Vea gives you one of the best run-stuffing nose tackles in the game, and Kalijah Kancey might have the best set of pass rushing skills from the interior defensive line. Definitely the most athletic, very fast, even though he's undersized. And I liked some of the picks. I do question some of the fits, not necessarily for scheme, but just because I thought some players might have been reached on in terms of like what the team actually needed as opposed to who they got.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs at 12. So the thing about Gibbs is what he's good at is the most important part of why you take running backs high, right? Like if you get a guy who can't catch out of the backfield, you don't even touch him until like significantly later, right? Because that's the most important part of it.
No point.
The fact that he can do that so effectively is big. For me, though, 12 is kind of rich because for a number of reasons. Now, he may not even run the ball that much, like an actual like handoff style plays, but if you really wanted to use him in an Alvin Kamara-like role, he's going to take a fair amount of development in route running. Like he's a guy where if you get him the ball on the move, he's really hard to bring down. He can cut on a dime. He can get north to south real fast. But if you are actually lining him up against slot receivers, especially NFL caliber slot receivers, I don't think he's got the refined skill set for that. So it's going to
Mhm.
take a little time. And so as much as I love the prospect, 12 is like, if you take him at 12, you're like, you are the key part of our offense,
Yes.
right? And it's like, I just don't know if that's going to be realistic as a rookie. You know,
Mhm.
I think he would have been really, really, really nice accentuating piece to a team that, you know, got him at the top of the second round or late in the first, who might already have a pretty well established offense. That's great, but like 12 is a lot to spend on a player that he's going to need a little work.
He will be behind. He will be behind one of the best offensive lines in football. That's definitely going to help him succeed. But
It will.
I thought they were going to go with defensive heavy first round, just because or at least like a receiver. I thought they would go receiver and maybe a cornerback, receiver, cornerback, edge, one of those guys. Because they were in perfect position where they were at, and they still were able to like get some draft capital from going from 6 to 12. That like
Receiver's tough because the best one by far, in my opinion, is a slot guy primarily.
you like
And
JSN.
oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah, for sure. I think he's the best receiver in the class by
Mhm.
a significant margin, and then Jordan Addison was my number 2 behind him.
I got those
and
guys flipped for me.
Flipped. So, but so as far as I'm concerned, going receiver would have been kind of tough because it just, they already have that. They already have a really good slot receiver. But defense made a lot of sense to me. And so I just did a Jack Campbell review with Trayshawn, and I said this in the review. I'm like, this guy, he's so good. I love him so much. And I have this feeling that when we finish his career, or at least the first few years of the contract, I'll be looking back and being like, knowing how good he is, like, why don't I just put him in the first round? Like, because I think we're overthinking it just because he's not quite as explosive, but he can still make really great plays. He's so good at understanding passing lanes.
Very smart player.
And so I think that, you know, he's going to be successful at disrupting passing game at the next level. So, you know, I don't think that he's going to be a liability in the passing game the way that some people might be expecting just because of measurables. Still, though, 18's a little rich when you got Kalijah Cansey still on the board, when you got Nolan Smith still on the board, when you have those guys. And that's just how I feel about it. So I'm probably less hard on that pick than some other people because I really do think he's a pretty special player.
Yeah. He's just old school. That's all it is.
Yeah.
It's an old school type of player, but I also think he might have the least likely ability of all the first rounders to bust. I think he's going to be a very good, very safe, very reliable starting inside linebacker. And, you know, if you happen to find a Pro Bowl in the first round, that's going above expectation. Your expectation for a first rounder is to be someone you can center your offense or your defense around. If they become a Pro Bowler, that's a plus. I don't know if Jack Campbell will ever be that, but for one, I think he has the best name of any linebacker in this class. Jack Campbell just sounds like he was born. Doesn't that sound like he was born to be a linebacker?
It sounds like an Iowa linebacker.
And two, like I said, like he's not great in man coverage, but when you ask him to play zone or even spy, he understands what he needs to do so well. He's always, you know, what I also love about him when I saw his tape, and I'm sure you probably saw the same thing, he's always around the ball. He knows where the ball is going to be. You want those smart linebackers to read the play and be where you need to be. And because he's such an effective tackler, I don't remember him when I watched his stuff, because I watched some Iowa film because I was watching Luke Van Ness and also Davon Merriweather. I don't remember him ever having a tackle broken. He's a very good form tackler.
Great form tackler. He's very strong. I mean, he takes on guards and he just will stand them up. Like, he's everything you could ever want from a middle linebacker. He's got, except for elite athleticism. And I don't think it's going to be, I think if he had that, we'd be talking about him as a top 10 pick.
Sure.
I'm not as hard on it as some other people.
If he had Deion Henley's coverage ability out of Washington State, he would be a top 10 player. Because Henley, I think, is like, he's so athletic. He was a wide receiver coming out of college, or he's a wide receiver coming out of his first year of college. That's what makes him so dangerous, because he can play coverage so well.
And the other thing is that, just like, you know, analytically speaking, a lot of people don't love to take linebackers in the first round, just regardless of how good they are. And so, you know, if you can put that aside, then he's probably in the conversation. But
I agree.
So let's talk about it. We'll talk about McDonald to the Jets, and we'll move on to the final third of the draft here.
Okay.
Okay. So I literally just looked at this guy today, and all the traits are there, all the tools are there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you look at traitsy guys like a Miles Murphy, and I could definitely justify taking him over a Miles Murphy
Yes.
because Miles Murphy has everything you could ever want from an athletic standpoint, but I don't see enough aggression in the way that he plays. He's just kind of like lets everything come to him, and
Yes.
so that's not really what I'm looking for in an edge rusher. So that may have something to do with coaching. I'm not sure, but regardless,
I
that's
felt
what
the
you
same
see
way
on
about
tape.
Brian Brisset for the defensive tackle. I wasn't that high on him either, but it might just be a Clemson thing. Maybe they're kind of losing their edge.
I don't know because, well, first of all, the coach did leave, but so I'm sure you know that. But the difference between Brisset and Murphy is that Murphy knows what's happening. And he's just very reactionary as opposed to proactive.
Mm-hmm.
Brisset, I feel like, is kind of lost a lot. I don't feel like he has the anticipation and the play recognition that Murphy has. But both of them are kind of wait and see, read and react. So
Yeah.
for all their athleticism, they don't get that. So I can get going over him, but at 15,
Who did
Will
you want?
McDonald.
I'm just curious. Who was the guy
I
you
will.
wanted?
I would have been fine with a number of guys. With all those tackles off the board, I would have been down with Kalijah Cansey. I would have been definitely down with Jackson Smith and Jigba, and I would have been definitely down with Nolan Smith. And the way that I love Darnell Washington, if they took him, like I'd probably be the only person that's a Jets fan that'd be cool with that, but I would have been fine with it because I think he's really, really good. But those are the guys that I'm kind of leaning towards. I thought any one of those guys might be the pick if the tackles weren't available.
Okay.
And so when the majority of those guys were there at that pick, I was kind of like, which one of those guys is it going to be? So I was surprised. McDonald, he's very unrefined. He's always going for the splash play. He'll turn his shoulder to you and just try and knife into the backfield. Doesn't really have great awareness of what's going on with all of the other potential blockers, right? Like not really aware of potential double teams. You know what I mean? He's an incredibly traitsy, unrefined player in quite a few different facets. I feel like he decides pre-snap what move he's going to use, and then he just kind of uses it no matter what happens. So the ceiling is really high for him. I just, at 15, it's like that's a lot of work. You know what I mean? It's a lot of work. I know you like him better than me, so talk me into this pick.
So, I was gonna say that like Will McDonald going that early was the catalyst for why the Cowboys took so long to make their pick. Because usually they have their guy figured out, and it went down to like the last 30 seconds before the pick came in. But McDonald, and I don't know how much film you saw of him. I saw a guy, who was the first guy off the snap, whether he was in a 2-point or 3-point stance, every time he played. He was a guy. He was a guy who, if he got his hand on the inside chest of the tackle, he actually showed a little bit of leverage, despite usually being undersized by comparison. I saw a guy who had a spin move, who had a lot of those rip moves in his repertoire. He's very tech savvy, and for perspective, he was my 4th rated edge in the draft. He's my 4th rated edge. I had Anderson, I had Wilson, I had Smith, and then I had him above Luke Van Ness. I know you like Luke Van Ness a little better. I think Will McDonald's going to be a better player. I also liked him in Robert Saleh's defense because he's going to be a guy that you ask to be both a stand-up outside linebacker as well as a pure four down lineman edge.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's going to need refinement, especially against the run. But as a pass rusher in year 1, I think you're going to have a guy who's going to get y'all 6-7 sacks in his rookie year. I'm really, really, really high on Will McDonald compared to you. I think y'all might. I think some people are gonna say y'all reached on him. I think y'all might have landed, and I'm just gonna again, I'm higher than you are. I think y'all might have landed another Pro Bowler at defensive end.
I mean, look, I think I have no dispute with the idea that he is Pro Bowl potential, and he might be, but it's definitely if he was in the conversation even for the Pro Bowl as a rookie, I'd be pretty surprised. Situationally, I'm not sure he could go to a better spot because there's so many guys on that defensive line that he's not really going to be relied upon. So, he can get in there in pass rushing situations and just kind of go off. But and honestly, that scheme does require you to play the run as if it is a pass and get into the backfield more so than sustaining, gaps. So it's a good fit. It's just there's when I see players that I'm really considering taking a first round swing on, the awareness of what's happening around them is important for me because it just means they understand the game beyond just like what they're told when they show up to their practice in their meeting room. And I just feel like that is it's a testament to how they study. It's a testament to just their understanding. It's a testament to spatial awareness. So I just don't feel like he has that. And so I don't hate him as a player. Like when we talked about him in our breakdown, I was like, I think he's a second round pick all day, but I didn't love it at 15. So
if y'all got him in the second round, would you have loved the pick? I guess by comparison,
it would have just depended who else is available, but I would have been fine with it. Would have been happy with it. I would have been fine with it even in like a trade back situation. I just think that there are those guys who do have that kind of awareness that we talked about. I think the Jets could use a slot receiver. They signed a few guys, but I think that if you were to get JSN in the slot,
now y'all can get Josh Downs in the second round.
I know. I love Josh Downs. So
Josh Downs, like just to veer off topic for a second, Josh Downs, I think might be the most technically savvy route runner amongst the bunch. And that's even including Jackson Smith-Njigba, who I think creates separation better. But I think in terms of as being a route running technician, in terms of footwork and separation and just like knowing where to step on the right time, Josh Downs to me, I think had better footwork, and that was because he's faster than Jackson Smith-Njigba. Obviously, the size is a concern there, but he's gonna be a slot. He's gonna be. That's what he's gonna do.
Yeah, he's my number 3 receiver, and I would have been more than fine spending a first round pick on Josh.
Really, even at 15?
No, well, not with Jackson Smith-Njigba there, that's for sure. But
okay, so if he was gone,
as a general, not specifically the Jets, just generally speaking, if I believe he is a first round player in this draft, I think he's incredible, and I think he could be a very high touch player, and he can even threaten you deep because he's got really good speed as well. So I think aside from size, he's got everything and then some. And so I agree with you. So if they do want to go slot receiver, they definitely can get him there. But I think that's probably enough Jets talk for now. But
let's get the 20s.
Yeah, I was a little surprised by that, especially because I'm a big Nolan Smith guy. But and also Lucas Van Ness is like, I don't think he would have been a great fit for the Jets scheme anyway. So it's like, fit does matter. All right, so 21, Quentin Johnston to the Chargers. 22, Zay Flowers to the Ravens. 23, Jordan Addison to the Vikings. So we get a run on receivers there. Then Deonte Banks to the Giants.
That's your guy.
That's my guy. I like Deonte Banks quite a bit. We talked about him earlier today as well. Dalton Kincaid goes to the Bills at 25. Cowboys get Mozzie Smith at 26. Jaguars get Anton Harrison at 27. And Miles Murphy goes to the Bengals at 28. Brian Bresee goes to the Saints at 29. Nolan Smith goes to the Eagles at 30. And Felix Anudike-Uzomah to the Chiefs at 31.
You're so much better at that. I've been calling him FAU because I've heard his name pronounced so many different ways. I don't want to be disrespectful. I just call him FAU or King Felix. Just because I know if I mispronounce his name, I'm going to feel really, really bad about it. Some people are like, I can forgive myself. I would rather him tell me how he pronounces his name until I say his name in whole.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I'll swing on it because I feel like I'm usually pretty good at it. If I miss, I don't dismiss it. I feel bad, but
Also, I love the Chiefs going George Karlaftis last year and then King Felix this year. Like they're really rebuilding that edge room. Like it seems like they could do no wrong. They pick last or like among the last picks every year, and they still land great players. I thought they're going to go receiver.
I wasn't sure what they were going to do, to be perfectly honest, because their offense was awesome last year. Yeah, he would be really good, but their offense was so good last year that it's like they kind of proved that they don't have to invest high. I mean, didn't they spend a second round pick on Sky Moore last year? Like,
right.
Wasn't the greatest rookie season ever, but they're probably expecting, some development there. So,
I think my favorite pick out of that, if I discount the Cowboys in that, I really love Jordan Addison to the Vikings. I think the Vikings just somehow keep finding really good players. And Addison, I told you, my wide receiver one. I think he's one of the best guys that create separation at the first, second, and third levels. And pairing him up with Justin Jefferson, who might be the best receiver in the game, along with an underrated KJ Osborne, who him and Addison can both switch in between the Y and Z positions. That's going to be a potent offense, but their defense needs players. And I thought that was a bit like that was all flash.
How in the world did the Los Angeles Chargers pass on Jordan Addison for Quentin Johnston?
I know that it made sense, right? It's LA all the way, right? I thought they're gonna go tight end. My buddy who covers the Chargers,
I thought they were going Jordan Addison.
My buddy who covers the tight end, who covers the Chargers. He's a Utah grad. His favorite players in the draft are Utah players like Clark Phillips and Dalton Kincaid. He was like Dalton Kincaid all the way. They want that tight end. They want to pair him up with Dalton Parham. They want to give Justin Herbert another security blanket, a guy who can play in the slot as a tight end or even like in line as like that tight end 2 sub Y tight end player. The guy that's kind of lined off the line. We saw him together. He can line up on the line of scrimmage and off the line of scrimmage, like kind of where the wing back, if you want to go a little old school with it, would be. I thought he would have been a good fit for the Chargers. I mean, I like him at the Bills. It just kind of surprised me because Dawson Knox is a top 10 tight end, and I guess they just wanted depth there.
Well, I think Dawson Knox is fine. Much like linebacker, there aren't really very many difference makers at tight end. That's also one of the reasons that I'm not always really into spending a first round pick. Like if Michael Mayer is one of the best tight ends in the NFL, if he's not like truly great, he's just another guy, kind of. Sure. And so I think Dalton Kincaid has the possibility to be really something amazing. And he also will need some work, but that's a home run swing right there. But Quentin Johnston he's not my favorite receiver in this class, not by a wide margin. And I think Jordan Addison just gives them, not only is he my number 2, who's way more pro ready, he also gives them exactly what they need.
Yes.
A deep threat who wins with finesse, not just like another big body.
And he's got better hands. I think Addison's got better hands than Johnston.
Way better hands.
Johnston maybe has like the size and speed factor going into him, and like when he has the ball in his hands, he can do dangerous things with it. But it's all about like I didn't see him win enough one-on-one coverage, and a lot of defenses in the NFL are gonna like key in on that. I do like him in that system, in Kellen Moore's system, because they do utilize a lot of 11 personnel, and they use a lot of three wide receiver looks. And when he's getting paired up, if I had to guess, he'd be the Z. Because Mike Williams is their X, and then they still have Keenan Allen as their slot guy, at least for another year. I like him as that third option. He doesn't have to be the number 1 guy right away. And it always helps an underdeveloped receiver to play with a good quarterback. And Justin Herbert is one of the 10 best quarterbacks in the game, so that ain't going to hurt him either. But I agree with you that I think Addison's the better player. I thought he definitely would have given a much more reliable deep threat. I think even Zay Flowers would have made more sense if they wanted a deep threat. I think it looks like they really want those tall guys because now they have like just 3 tall receivers across the board. It looks like they're going for height over anything else, just based on the looks. Their tight end Donald Parham is 6'9". So I guess because you said it earlier, fit matters, and and it just looks like that's what they want. They want those tall guys who can do the things the other guys can't. I think he's underdeveloped compared to Jordan. I think Jordan Addison's a much more ready player. I think Jackson Smith and Jigba, had he been there, would have been a better pick. And I think Quentin Johnston, I think he can do well playing as the third guy in the Chargers, because I actually like it whenever rookie receivers come in. They don't have to be the number one guy right away. I always appreciate that because it gives them a chance to really learn without being force fed right out the gate. It can be overwhelming sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think anytime that you can put a rookie in a situation where they don't have to be the guy, it's definitely a beneficial thing. Receivers, certainly. Receivers are one of the only ones where you kind of get to do that, because it's like it's hard to draft a corner in the first round and then not play him. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
There are certain positions where you can do that, certain positions where it's harder to. But, I mean, I like Zay Flowers too. I think Flowers gives you he's a solid deep threat. I think his route running needs a fair amount of refinement, but he's also the kind of guy where like you can really get him involved heavily in the offense if you formulate him touches, because he can do a lot with the ball in his hands. And I think
sure.
if you have a plan for that, then that's a great pick. But you just got to realize it's going to be a while before he's going to be winning one-on-one regularly. But either one, I would rather take over Johnston for sure. Even Hyatt, like if you don't, he's a better deep threat too.
Johnston was my let me check. Yeah, my sixth receiver on my rankings. So I agree with you. I think, like I said, I think Johnston's upside is going to be just a really good wide receiver too. I don't think he's ever going to be your number one guy. I don't think he will. Zay Flowers, I thought it was ironic that they traded away Hollywood Brown last year and they drafted a guy who was in a similar build, similar skill set, except Zay Flowers has much better hands than Marquise Brown.
I also believe he's better laterally than Marquise Brown. I feel like Marquise Brown's a little bit more linear of a player. I think Zay Flowers brings a lot.
Yeah, I like Zay Flowers.
In
You love Zay Flowers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he's my number 4 guy, right behind Josh Downs.
Oh, I thought you ranked higher than that. Okay.
But I mean, I also, you got to realize how much I like Josh Downs too. So it's like, you know what I mean? That goes into it as well. And I don't put Downs down just because he's a slot guy necessarily.
I see what you did there.
But yeah, so I like Zay Flowers a lot. I really do. I think he's what I love about him is his tenacity, the way that he goes about getting his nose in there on blocking plays whenever he can. I love that he's always chirping at DBs. I love the energy that he plays with. And I really love the fact that you can get him involved without having to rely on him winning one-on-one. Because if you don't necessarily have that, you need a way that this guy can get touches, build confidence, and impact your offense as a round one player. I believe that there's 3 guys who can win one-on-one right now consistently. That's JSN, Addison, and Downs. And then behind that, I think you got Flowers who can sometimes, but also you have the built-in touches. And then Hyatt, I wouldn't take anyone else in the first round. Hyatt, I think he threatens you deep, which is kind of affects the game in a different kind of way. Yeah. But that does affect the game. So that's kind of the way that I view it. I love a lot of things about Zay Flowers. He's just like, he's kind of missing one of the key parts of what receivers do for me to really be like, hammer him hard for a top 20 pick. But ultimately, I think where he went makes a lot of sense. I think you run him in jet sweeps and motions and stuff. It's gonna just put more pressure on teams to defend Lamar Jackson. So I get where the thinking is for them with that pick. Anybody else you want to point out here?
I really liked and I shouldn't say it for the Giants, but I really liked the Deonte Banks pick just because I think he might be the most physical corners, despite not being necessarily the biggest one. He might be the I know you love him. I do. I think he was my 5th rated cornerback, if I remember right from my rankings. I don't have him in front of me, but he was very high. He was high on my board. I had him as a late first, early second. I didn't see him leaving the top 40. I saw him as a guy who you could play in man or even in zone and be a really good guy in the run defense, as well as a guy who you could match up with one-on-one in coverage if you want to play man. So I like that pick a lot for them, even though obviously I don't, depending how you feel about the Giants. Like me personally, also you being a Jets fan, obviously y'all I guess feel some type of way about the Giants. Not really sure how that works.
We play them
And
once every 4 years. It's hard to really have much of a rivalry, you know.
and I don't, and I told you before, I ain't high on Brian Brees, the defensive lineman who went from Clemson, who went to the Saints.
I'm not either.
So when I saw him play, and I put this out there that when I saw him win, it was usually against like lower level competition. When he went up against like the higher level offensive lineman, he looked lost. It looked like he was like just trying to overpower guys, but actually like trying to like find his way on his assignment. And again, it was all speculation because I don't know what the assignment is, but it looked like he was trying to play bully ball. And that reminded me of Tristan Hill, a guy the Cowboys drafted a couple years ago who was really just more like a mauler and athletic defensive tackle, but really didn't follow what he was supposed to do and often was beaten by higher level competition.
Mm-hmm.
And I had him as like a third round guy. I thought the Saints would have been better off like going a different route, but that was probably the one first round pick that I was like, at least in the last 10 picks, that I was kind of questioning.
Well, the thing about Bresee is that a lot of people really like him because obviously number one overall recruit at one point in his career. And then I know I haven't watched any of his old tape, but supposedly it's significantly better than it was this year. There were some personal tragedies that he had to deal with. And so I think some people it sounds cold to say giving him a pass, but the reality is that they're being, I don't think most people are not disputing that the tape is not as good this year, but I think there's some outside influence that goes into their opinion of him. Personally speaking, for me, I understand all of that, but and he's still clearly a very gifted physically player, but if I don't see it, then I don't know it's coming. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
If I don't see it, then I don't know it's actually there. So, and I didn't really see it. I just felt like he kind of wasn't really aware of what was going around him for the most part, and a very read and react type of player. And you'll see him make a splash play, but not consistently. And for a first round pick, the other thing is that he's widely reported to be a very high character guy. And so I think that he probably won some people over in meeting rooms as well and whatnot. Sure. But, the sky's the limit. This is kind of a Saints type pick. Like, they want to go for the big time potential, but we shall see. All right. Anybody else here that stood out to you? So let's see. I mean, so I like Deonte Banks also. We talked about him a little bit before we did the breakdown of him earlier, and I think Banks is very versatile. I don't think he's the best corner in this class, but I think he's a high level athlete. I think that with more refinement, he could be a top 10 type corner. And I'm fine with the Giants taking him. I think that some of the issues that I saw, I would have to assume that some of the issues that I saw with Joey Porter Jr. were also perceived by some NFL teams, because obviously a fair number of corners went the first round and he wasn't. He'll probably be a relatively high second round pick, but
probably
I think athleticism really is a major selling point for cornerback play. I think it's really, really hard to be a good corner in the NFL and be a first round pick if you don't have the prototypical measurements and testing numbers, because there's just been a lot of guys who were good corners in college that just didn't work in the NFL, and athleticism was kind of like the number one thing. I mean,
sure.
Do you remember the kid? He's from Michigan State. Michigan State came out in 2014.
Okay.
He was a corner, went to the Bengals, I think. And
yeah. I know exactly who you're talking about.
He was so good and so physical. I mean, he didn't have the same exact measurables, but like reminds me of the style of play of Joey Porter Jr. and really just never panned out. He had family in the NFL too, like other what's his name? You looking it up right now?
I am looking it up right now.
It's so annoying because I forget what his name is, but it's a similar idea, right? So it's like, is this guy that's like, you know, if you just look at the tape and the production and effectiveness in college, in the Big Ten specifically, it's like it worked. But once you get to just this elite athleticism across the board, it's hard to consistently win if you don't have that athleticism in your back pocket. I don't think he had the length of Joey Porter Jr., but
Darqueze Dennard.
Dennard, yeah. And so there was some other Dennards in the NFL too. So he had the NFL bloodlines and all, but I just like that's kind of what I worry about a little bit with Joey Porter Jr. And I think someone will take a chance on him, but I'm not really surprised that he didn't end up going in the first round, kind of because of that. But yeah, I mean, we are just about at an hour here. And I think we've hit most of the big ones that we wanted to talk about, the biggest surprises. Is there anything else that you wanted to cap off? Do you want to talk about Mozzie for a sec? Do you have anything that you wanted to dig in on him?
I feel like I said all I needed to say at the beginning. You know, the Cowboys have guys who can stuff the run, but can't rush the passer, and then vice versa. Mozzie Smith is the one guy they have now that can do both. I thought he'd be gone in the top 20 somewhere. I was pleasantly surprised they picked him because the Cowboys traditionally don't pick defensive tackles till the third round at the earliest. So I ain't complaining. I thought it was a great pick.
I think he's an enforcer. I think he brings a tone to the defense that I'm not sure that the defensive line has. I don't want to say it doesn't have. I don't know if it has it on the interior.
They would welcome it.
I think so. And he also commands double teams because he's just so freaking powerful. And anytime that you can force that on a regular basis, it just helps out everybody else. He doesn't have great get off. He can improve it a little bit with technique, I think. He's just a big ass guy, so he's never going to be the fastest or the quickest. And I'm not sure
if Jalen Carter ain't in this draft, there's no reason to think he's not going to be the first defensive tackle, like ranked among a lot of people's boards.
Yeah, certainly, because the questions of size for Calijah Kancey are very reasonable. I mean, I personally don't share them, but
I think he's going to be a good player too, though.
Kancey, I think Jalen Carter is probably going to be the best defensive tackle in the NFL if he keeps his head on straight and he works hard. I really do believe that. The dude is unreal talented. But I think Calijah Kancey is going to be one of the better defensive tackles too, and
especially as a pass rusher.
Yeah, and in particular, and I think that especially also, we talked about some of those schemes that ask you to shoot gaps, even in the run game more often than not. You know, so if he were in a place like that, I think he's even better off. The Bucs are obviously not that, but you know, with a big run stuffer like Vita Vea, if you can force double teams, you know, you line them up next to each other, you force double teams to Vea, and then you try and get Kancey one-on-one. You know, there's a logic to that as well. But all right, that's it for the first round. Oh man, second round I'm looking forward to. It's going to be a lot less work for me. I'm going to kind of hand that off to everybody else a little bit. Got some other work to do, so I'm just going to get to kind of sit down and watch that. I'm going to get to bed. I'm going to sleep. I'm going to wake up tomorrow and reevaluate what I think of Will McDonald IV. Watch some more tape. Talk myself into the pick. All right. Shane, thanks for joining me. Appreciate you very much. You have a good night, everybody. Find me on Twitter at TheMaxDean. You can find Shane at Shane Carter TX. You can find Defiant Takes Football at Defiant Takes on all social media outlets. You can find us live, generally speaking, on Monday and Thursday, along with all of the player breakdowns that we now have completed. So go check those out and find the players that you will have to be competing against in your own division now, and all the written work at DefiantTakesFootball.com from the writers who are now covering the brand new draft picks for all the teams. Guys, We'll see you very soon.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.